Hi everyone, welcome to the Asian Hustle Network podcast. Today we have a very special guest with us. His name is Raad Ahmed. Raad is the founder and CEO of Law Trades, angel investor, writer, and musician. In 2011, Raad started My Facebook Cover Photo, one of the first apps in the Facebook App Store that grew to over 30 million hits per month while attending law school. In 2015, he got into the 500 Global Flagship Accelerator program and launched Law Trades, one of the first marketplaces for legal services that made it easy for big companies to hire legal freelancers. The company has gone on to raise $9.7 million in total funding, and freelancers earn millions on the platform every year. In 2019, he started publishing a newsletter called Space Cult. Raad is originally from Queens, New York, and a graduate from the University at Buffalo Law School. Raad, welcome to the show.
Hey everyone, we're so happy to have Raad Ahmed today on our podcast. Raad's an awesome entrepreneur. We got introduced through she got introduced to one of our friends. She's actually currently working as our head of growth, and we're super excited to hear more about his story. So Raad, what was your childhood experience like and what led you down the entrepreneurship path?
I think it was a pretty tough slash interesting childhood, like probably many first generation folks in the US. I had a really strict dad and a really lenient mom. And I think that that kind of balanced out in certain ways where, the expectation has always kind of been to like be X, Y, and Z. Like probably many people probably listening to this podcast have experience, lawyer, doctor, scientist, whatever. But my mom played a really interesting role in my life where she sort of like encouraged me to pursue more of like the creative side of me. That was just a little bit more free spirited, free flowing. And I actually grew up listening to a lot of music, and I used to play in a punk rock band, and I love that creative ability of it. The downside was that it didn't really make a ton of money, which is why I ended up sort of like going the more sort of college route, and then and went to law school and all of that. But then eventually I was just like, I'll figure out some way to make money off of it. And a startup seemed like a good middle ground of like doing creative stuff, and then hopefully at some point it makes some money and kind of going from there.
Yeah, I really like that mindset too, because contrary to belief, I think compared to how it was back then, that there's a lot more ways you can make money if you're creative right now. But I think like 10, 12 years ago, the idea of being a musician, being a cook, being a content creator seems so far-fetched, you know? Um,
Yeah.
so out of curiosity too, like how do you felt like as you were just being more creative, being a rock band or being in a band and playing music, do you feel like that sort of experience helped you become the entrepreneur that you are today? Like, what kind of creative process would you feel like that you took from that experience to, and then you applied it to be like creating your own company, which is Law Trades, which you talk about in a bit. Do you feel like that process has sort of like helped you shape the person that you are today?
I think so, because I still basically listening to the same music that I've listened to like in high school, and I still get like a similar feeling, which is like for me, like listening to punk rock music just made me feel really free, made me feel like anti-establishment, made me just want to do the opposite of what everyone else is doing. And I think fundamentally, really good startups go against the grain in that way, where they look at the world and they see what exists and they try to do the opposite of that. And with some sort of good measure incentive behind it of helping people. So I there's always a part of me that's just like that sort of high schooler, skater, punker kid, but now like doing like internet companies, and there's a lot of overlap behind that. I'm definitely more on like the product design, marketing side of things, and like I like still like lots of hours of deep work. So I'm not a big like meeting guy, even though like nowadays like we're doing a lot of recruiting, so I have to sort of talk to like a lot of people, which is fine because a lot of them are really interesting, and I love to get to know interesting people. But yeah, like there's always an element that I guess for me to still keep this fun, where I have to still feel like I'm creating something new. I'm iterating. I have a say in something like the fonts or the colors or the shade of gray we're using. It's just the same old story as before, but just interpreted through the lens of a company, I think.
Yeah, I really like that too. I really like the fact that you mentioned that you're going against, establishment, anti-establishment, and the fact that you became a lawyer. you know, so I really like
Yeah.
the contrast, and kind of walk us through that too. Like, what year was this when you decided to become a lawyer, and like like why didn't you continue being a lawyer? What led you down the path of, hey, one day I'm just gonna wake up, I'm gonna be a startup founder, I'm gonna create this awesome company? Like, what was that mindset behind law school at the time, and what year was this, so you can give us more of more of an idea?
Yeah. So 2010 is when I started my first year of law school. Why law school? I was actually genuinely interested in law and philosophy, and that was actually my major in undergrad. It was philosophy of law and legal studies. And I just found law to be this fascinating thing. It's like this piece of code that society writes and people abide by it. And it can change and it can be evolved, and and it kind of makes. So from that perspective, I found it like an interesting sort of area to sort of learn about, and then law school just seemed like a logical next step for me to just get deeper into that. And also it probably made my parents really happy that I was kind of going down that path. But at least for me, in my head, I was just like, okay, but I'm genuinely interested in it, so it doesn't feel like I'm doing this for somebody else. um the way that it sort of detoured was probably after my first year of law school. I actually launched this other internet company kind of for fun. It was this web app for Facebook. It was actually one of the first apps in the Facebook App Store when they had it around, and it allowed people to customize their cover photos. So I built this simple website where you can go in and scroll through different sort of cover photo images, whether it's like pop stars or Justin Bieber photos or quotes, and you would click it and it would automatically change it on your Facebook profile. So somehow that grew to about 30 million hits a month, and I ran some banner ads and turned it into like a six-figure business while I was still in law school. So then when it came time to like interview for like different firms, I was like, I'm like making like more money like doing less work, so like that doesn't like add up or make a lot of sense for me to trade that off. And and that's when I guess I caught like the entrepreneurial slash internet bug. And I've always been like tinkering around the internet growing up. I just found it really fascinating. And actually, like the internet was like very much not like banned from my house, but my parents really didn't like me being on like AIM and like browsing the web and like joining random chat rooms. They just found it to being like a waste of time. So like when I was younger, I would have to like sneak like down to the basement where we had our dial up and eventually our sort of modem, and like at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning I would chat with people, and like I would build little like AIM buddy icons and sell some of them for fun and sell burn CDs. So I had this whole sort of thing on the internet that like was really frowned upon by my family growing up. So I guess it all just kind of like connected eventually back to law school, and I was just like, whoa, that was really cool. I built something that like removed a couple of steps and a bunch of people found it valuable, and I figured out some way to sell some banner ads and make some money off of it. Like, can I like do this again? And like, what would that look like? And that sort of like set the stage a little bit for Law Trades, which is like a marketplace for legal services. And it was a much harder problem to solve for and took way longer than just like, oh, let me post this up and the thing goes viral. But it's been just like an amazing learning experience, journey, and all of that. And I just can't see myself doing anything else.
I love it. I love how you found your true passion. And when you brought AIM, man, like those were the days, dude. That was so fun back then, just being on AIM all the time. But I know exactly what you meant. My parents said the same thing. They're always like, why are you on your computer? Why aren't you like reading books? Why aren't you out? Why aren't you going to a library? But I think like that experience is like I think that really shaped who we are. We like to stay interconnected, like, to build our curiosity with the internet, got us familiar with everything. So, man, that just brings back a lot of good memories too. And I think that the best part about this story is like about how you're able to tie back the experience of building. I believe it's my Facebook coverphoto.com. Is that website still
Yeah.
up?
Yeah, probably not. I mean, I think I still pay the hosting fees for it, but like I haven't updated it in years.
Yeah.
But eventually also like there's competitors that came out and like out SEO'd me, and like there's a bunch of copycats. And that was like also like a learning lesson where I was like, oh, this was fun and like it's gonna last like this forever, but it only
Yeah.
like was like a good like 2 or 3 years, and then like the traffic sort of spiked back down. So that was like really my first lesson in entrepreneurship, which is just
Yeah.
kind of like you can't just like launch something and just expect it to just like do everything. Like you have to like really
Innovate.
monitor it, you have to improve it, you have to iterate it. You can't just sit back and collect the checks. So it was an amazing high, and it was also like a really low, but it like just taught me, like that's just how the internet, like internet companies work in that way. And you have to constantly be like, I'm sure for you guys have to constantly be coming out with like really awesome content and like
Mhm.
growing the brand and growing your community. And it's not just like a set it and forget it kind of thing. Like there is like blood, sweat, and tears that go into products like this, even if it looks like it's totally free and you just update something, like you need a team behind it. And I think I took a lot of that lessons into kind of like building out like my current company, but it was still fun. I enjoyed it. I had no intention of making any money from it. So that was just like a
Mhm.
delightful surprise.
Yeah, I mean, it really led you down the path of like learning a lot and getting your feet wet into entrepreneurship. Um, but yeah, I want to talk a little bit more about law trades. Like, I see that you were a part of 500 startups. So walk us through this. Like, so during law school, you started this Facebook cover app company. So after law school, what made you make the transition? Did you start your career as in big law firms in New York, or was this something in the back of your mind where it's like, man, like there must be something more to life than just working in my corporate job? Like, what was that? What was the start of like law trades that we should know about?
Yeah, so I just started tinkering with law trades right after I graduated law school. I ended up just going all in on it. Instead of going and working as a lawyer, I was just like, let me just try this thing out for a year. Worst case, if it doesn't work out, I can go and work as a traditional, as a traditional lawyer at any of these firms that are in New York City. But I really wanted to give it a good year or two and just to figure out like if this was a viable path or not. I had saved some money from like the Facebook app site, and there was a few other similar ones I did, content-based websites that just got like made money from like ad clicks. And to me, I just basically spent, it ended up being longer than a year, but I spent the first couple of years really just treating it like a side project kind of thing where I was working on it a lot, but I wasn't ready to just be like, this is what I'm doing. Like I still needed to think through the idea. I still needed to figure out who I'm going to sort of sell this to. I mean, today Law Trades is like a marketplace that connects people to legal freelancers, a kind of like a Fiverr Upwork model, but for corporate legal services. But at the time when we launched, it was like just I was just like I just want to just connect people, right? I was really inspired by at the time there were companies like Uber and Airbnb were really starting to sort of take off, and I saw all these other marketplace models out there for all these industries, and I was just like, well, I kind of know how a law firm operates. I do know why law firms are very expensive because there's a bunch of overhead. They have physical offices in really fancy locations. There's a bunch of partners at the top that make millions of dollars. Like, what if you just got rid of all of that and just connected these independent lawyers directly to clients? Like, wouldn't it be faster? Wouldn't it be more affordable? And if we took all this offline work and brought it on the internet, could people be more productive that way? But at its earliest days, like Law Trades was just this website that had two buttons, one that said, I want to provide legal services, one that says, I need legal services. And people opted in, and then I made it look like it was automated, but it was just basically me just email introducing people and just letting them figure it out and just learning from how they interacted and what kind of services they need. And I just kept drilling deeper and deeper into that.
That is an amazing story. And this is a definition of an MVP, man, like minimal viable product. And really getting
Yeah.
that idea into place too. And I really like the fact that you created a marketplace. But at what point were you creating this product where you realized that you have product market fit, right? And how did you
Yeah.
advertise this product too? Did you go on different forums? Did you pay for ads? Um, I would imagine it's 2015, so social media is still around. Did you leverage social media to find a product market fit, or did you get like boots on the ground, go out there, door knock these law firms, and be like, hey, like check out my app? Like, how did you hustle your way and get more users?
Yeah, so it started with that. I eventually recruited my co-founder, who's still with the company now. I went to college with him, and he was in my fraternity. And we did start like knocking door to door, going on Yelp, like with a Square reader, charging people $300 to join the platform and promising them clients, even though we had no idea how we would get any clients. And then we realized like that actually is the harder problem to solve for, not getting lawyers to pay for your services. So it started off as like the SaaS subscription model, and like it would give we allowed lawyers to like upload their real-time availability. So it was kind of like a ZocDoc for lawyers, where clients could go in, click like a slot, get a consultation, and they would get a lead and they would pay us in exchange for that. That wasn't really good product market fit. It wasn't sustainable. We were going after so many different practice areas, from divorce lawyers to personal injury lawyers, and like it was just we were spread too thin. And eventually we focused around startups and small businesses, and we found, well, I'll tell you like more of this story later. We thought that we had product market fit at that time, but it really wasn't. But it was enough for us to get the attention of 500 startups, because we were growing. We were, I think, doing a few $1,000s in revenue a month, and it was like picking up, and we were focused on startups. And in terms of like social network and how we marketed, I actually wrote a lot on Quora. So I just basically went on this website called Quora, which is a Q&A website. And I just filtered by all the legal questions that people were asking. And I just cracked open my old law school textbooks and just answered hundreds and thousands of them for free. And I just would link law trades at the bottom to sort of check it out. And a bunch of people from Quora checked out the website, because I would answer this question like, should I incorporate as an LLC or a C Corp? And I must have answered that in like 50 different ways on the site. But it eventually drove some traffic back to the main homepage. And what's cool about Quora is like it also like picks up with SEO. So like, you know, if it is like a really popular question, people can type it on Google, and then Quora will usually be like the first answer there. So not only do you get Quora traffic, you get Google SEO traffic as well. So that like jump started a lot of our early growth, or a lot of our early users. We eventually applied to 500 startups, and after like 2 failed attempts, they accepted us like on the 3rd try, because we just asked anyone and everyone that was involved in 500 startups to put in a good word for us. So we definitely hustled our way into that, and crazy story with that, but eventually, you know, we got in, moved to Mountain View, grew the company from there, and you know, we can get into phase 2 of this, but we eventually had to make another major pivot to the company that kind of brought us into where we are now.
Dude, I love the stories. The stuff, like, if you guys can see, there's a big smile on my face from the pure hustle of everything you've done, dude. Like being at Quora, like I didn't realize that's actually very genius. Like go in there, establish yourself as an expert, so now you're building the trust with your community online, and having that flow traffic into your new website. So I think that's absolutely amazing. And 500 startups, right? You talk to everybody to get into that. I think that's extremely smart. So I think what people really forget about startups and business and whatnot is that the relationship you build is super important, right? And I can feel that with the hustle and the relationship that you have. I can already see why you're so successful already at what you do, because you have that drive inside you. And I feel like with a lot of founders out there, when like a lot of new founders, especially when they hit a problem, they kind of just like, oh no, there's a problem. I just stop and figure it out. You know, I feel like with great founders, they run through the problem. Like, you know what? This is not going to stop me. I'm just going to run through it, figure out a solution, and we're going to make it work. And time again, I hear in your story where it's like, I have to find my customers, to find paying customers, and then figure out the product, right? So I think that's super, super smart. And over time, like you end up refining your products. I want to quickly talk about that too. Like, what kind of pivots did you make in your product to turn into it what it is today? Because I know I know that you initially mentioned that you thought you had more product market fit, but what was a real pivot that caused the product market fit? But sometimes as you're working inside your company and you're working on your product, you can't see that you don't have product market fit. So what came to that realization where it's like, whoa, maybe we don't have product market fit? And that's extremely difficult for most founders to realize. What was that point for you?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tricky thing, right? Because you can sort of grow your company and get like paying customers and, you know, just assume that you have product market fit. But, you know, fundamentally, if your underlying unit economics is not sustainable, and your customers aren't really sticky and they're not constantly coming back to the platform and using it more and more, it becomes really hard and really expensive to grow your product. But you can be sort of tricked into thinking that you have product market fit, which is kind of like what happened to us. So we were selling to startups and small businesses, really early stage folks. Eventually got into 500 startups. They invested, like, I think at the time, 125K, and then we eventually raised like a seed round shortly after, like doing demo day there. I think total round raised in our seed round was a little over like $3 million, over the course of like 2 or 3 tranches, and it was led by Draper Associates. They're like a kind of a big VC fund. They've done like SpaceX, Robinhood, and all those cool companies. So we were like on like cloud 9. We like got out of 500 startups, and we got all this cash, and we're just like, we're gonna grow the crap out of this thing. And at that point, we switched a little bit away from like just posting on Quora because it wasn't scalable to like doing more ads on Google and running AdWords. And at a certain point, I think we were spending close to like $100,000 a month on Google ads, just acquiring lots and lots of customers and just focusing on growing like the top line revenue in the business, even though we were actually like losing a good amount of money. Because the problem with the early stage startup small business segment is like the vast majority of them go out of business within like the first year. And then the ones that stick around are using you not so frequently. Like if you think about when you're starting a company, like the last thing you want to spend a lot of money on is a lawyer, right? And using it frequently. Like you're trying to like hire for engineers, you're trying to grow your, trying to market, you're trying to spend money on like, customer acquisition. You're not just like, let's spend lots of money every month and more every other month, like on lawyers, So the problem with that is when you're building a marketplace startup, if your demand side usage isn't like predictable and recurring, then that doesn't provide a lot of incentive for your supply side to stay on board. Because if it's kind of coming in and out, then they get disinterested, they'll join another platform, they'll take another job somewhere else, and the model sort of falls apart. So at this time, we were losing lots of cash, but we were growing top line revenue. I think at this point we were doing like anywhere from 100 to like 250K in like monthly top line gross revenue, which is, a sizable amount. And actually most companies would be able to, like at that time, like this is like, I think like 2017, 2018, raise a Series A, which is what we were going to do. We're just like, we're going to raise a Series A and we're going to figure out this like, losing of money thing like later on. We'll just raise a bunch of cash. What ended up happening is we failed to raise our Series A. At the time, we didn't know why, but then we realized that there was a competitor that came out, and he kind of like took our idea a little bit and raised like $70 million on this idea. And it so happened that he was like a famous founder. You guys might have heard of him. His name was Justin Kan, and he launched his company called Atrium. And we were just like sitting there watching it, and he raised from like every single VC that we spoke with. And we're just like, so that's why everybody stopped like answering our calls. They basically like, and it's like, I was like, I'm not even like, I get it, right? Like the guy had like close to $1 billion exit that's doing a legal tech company. Why would you trust a bunch of like nobodies from Queens to like be able to compete with him? So this kind of goes into the second phase of it, where we were forced to get profitable. And at that time it was like a travesty. And we were just like, we all like, me and my co-founder stopped taking like salaries. We like got like laid off like 80% of like the team, and we just had to get profitable, and it forced us to basically do that because we had no choice. And at this point we were all in on LawTrades, right? So like failure just wasn't an option. It was just like that, it just can't happen. So it was a blessing in disguise because it forced us to make this pivot into selling into, and this is kind of like maybe phase 3 of this story, where we found true product market fit by actually selling to legal departments in bigger companies. So we now work with companies like DoorDash, Pinterest, Opendoor, AngelList. And what we do is we sell to the general counsels at those companies who have a daily legal need. So it went from startups that might have like an annual or quarterly legal need to companies that use us every single hour because their legal teams are small, but their companies are growing and scaling like crazy. So like, it seemed like, we were like doomed for failure, but it all kind of like made sense. We actually rebuilt the product, but we used pieces of it that worked for the small business side and tweaked it for more longer term enterprise level engagements. And finally it all clicked. And our LTVs went from like $1,000 to basically close to like $1 million. And we started attracted even better supply, and the revenue was predictable. And then we kept getting more customers, which attracted more supply, and then we got more supply, it attracted more customers, and then we got to cash flow positive just based off of that sort of pivot. Atrium, as you guys may or may not know, they ended up going out of business. We ended up surviving. Another competitor also went out of business, and now we just raised our Series A couple of weeks ago.
Congratulations on raising a Series A. And I think that behind every quote unquote bad situation, there's always a silver lining, right? So I'm really happy that you guys are able to like pivot and make it work, because I think you guys really cracked that problem. Because I think had this not happened to you guys, like you might not be sustainable, right? And I think that I do feel like most first time founders fall in the mindset too, where it's like, I'll just figure out like revenue later, get profitable later. I'll just go out there and raise a Series A because they're running out of money, right? But I think that contrary to belief, if you don't have to raise money and become profitable, that's probably the best way to go, right? The fact that you raise your Series A so much later, it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't take away from your success. It actually means you're even more successful because you never had to raise, right?
Yeah.
So I'm really curious too, like what was going through your mind? I would imagine during this time where it's like, oh my God, like things are not looking great. And that tends to be a very common theme with being a founder, right? Because some days are rosy, some days are complete crap. So what was going through that mindset where you're just like, oh crap, what do we do? What was going through your mind when you had to lay off like 80% of your staff, no longer take salary? Like what was put us in that mind state right now? Like what were you feeling? How did you pull yourself out of that rut to reinvent the company essentially?
It was really depressing. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. I mean, it's not as glamorous as like you think it is, which is just like you go through this, period of trough and then you come out swinging. It felt like it was forever. It felt like we were in the bottom of this abyss and there was really like no way out. And even all of our solutions, we were second guessing ourselves because we're just like, well, like we clearly didn't make the right decisions because we're in this situation. How can we actually like trust ourselves? And I think it helps having a good like co-founder or a good like early employee or team. I think, we went from like, it was eventually at some point, it was just like 3 or 4 of us. It was myself, my co-founder, our one engineer, and then our one like ops finance person who would just sort of like make sure that, there was enough money coming in to make payroll meet. And we would just sort of sit together, and some days were just like really quiet and we wouldn't really say too much to each other. And other days we would just explode and just be like, this is not working, that's not working. And like, but I think ultimately, like having the trust, at least for me, like I started the company, but like I brought on my co-founder pretty early on, like knowing that he wasn't ready to quit, like gave me hope. And then I think like when I got hope, he got hope from that. So it was a little bit contagious in that way. And we were just like, no, you know what? Like we're going to like figure this out. Let's look at the data. Let's look at who's using the site. And that, that led us to finding this one general counsel who worked at this company called EquityZen that used the app like every single day. And we gave him a call. We asked him a bunch of questions, and he was just like, yeah, like, I just want to use you guys on a monthly basis. I don't want to continuously start projects like startups do. And that's when this light bulb moment went off, and we researched what a general counsel was and what they did and what his company was about. And his company was way bigger than other startups we've sort of worked with. And then it also just forced us from a financial standpoint, like I didn't go to business school, but like, like the way you sort of like get like a business school education is when your startup is failing, because it forces you to look at cash flows. It forces you to read a financial statement. It forces you to like reduce expenses. And like, I learned how to read a financial statement for the first time when the company was failing and actually like care about that. So like all of these things that were just like, the harder the problem, like the bigger the lesson. And like there was no amount of schooling or advice or networking with people that would have taught what we went through during that 2 to 3 year period of making that pivot. And it required us to also shut down the startup side of the business, which was doing a decent 6-figure monthly revenue, to just focus on this segment because we couldn't do both. We were only 4 people. So like it was even scarier because now we're just like completely shutting down this other side of the business and going all in on this one side that was even smaller than, like, from a revenue standpoint, than that one. And it was scary as hell, but like I knew that like we had to sort of go for the swing. And it's kind of like we also were just kind of like, what else do we have to lose than just go all in on this? And you know, after sort of the ego part of it kind of went away, we were just like, let's just do this. Let's go. Let's double down on it. And you know, and it worked out. And you know, we're about to cross like 1 million a month in revenue, and there's no sort of like slowdown in sight. But it wasn't easy, and it was just kind of like the harder it is, it's almost like the rewards are also like the harder and riskier it is, the rewards are a little bit higher as well, I think. You know, I don't want to say like there was a kind of like the second part to this pivot was like we made this pivot, and you know, we were just like, all right, we're good, we're heading into like 2020 strong, and then COVID happened, and like then everything stopped again. So we're like on this like path. We're like, yes, we just made enough money to get cash flow positive. And then every company in those first couple of months just paused their usage with us. And we're just like, holy crap. And the thing with running a marketplace is like, it's not like a SaaS product. It's not like a consumer app. Like there's people on the other side that are depending on this as their main source of income. And the money needs to flow. And if a customer or a bunch of them suddenly stop using it, then it's really, really bad from a supply perspective, because you're still having to sort of pay them out, even though like a customer might sort of stop their spend. And, you know, there's all these sort of things there. But that was the last bit. And then we went through one more dip. And then finally, after that happened, then like usage just spiked up like crazy, because companies needed to hire remote lawyers because the whole world went remote. We just spent the last couple of years building the largest database of like remote legal freelancers. Legal budgets were cut in half. Our services were half the price of a big law firm. Word of mouth grew like crazy. This was like a much better alternative than using a big law firm. And then it all just sort of like came together like afterwards. But it doesn't stop really. But at least for now, knock on wood, it's stabilized for the most part.
Holy moly! Like that story, dude, give me chills, because like this is what we want in the podcast, right? You want this raw, unfiltered, unglamorous, horrible startup experience, but it's very rewarding, right? And it's everything about your story is great. And I feel like you completely understand your situation really well and understand like with a clear mind, it's like, this is what I need to do when things are not looking great, right? And then unlike most people in this situation, you didn't give up. Like you kept looking for new solutions. And you know, I feel like when your back is against the wall and you have nothing to lose, you're gonna make things happen, right? You do things you would never do, because now you're forced to look outside the box. Like, oh no, like I need to make this happen. A lot of people depend on me. You feel a sense of like responsibility for like making it through and taking care of people and taking care of your customer, your brand, or your company, right? So one thing I'm really curious about too, as things were looking really sour, how are you able to manage the expectations with your other co-founders? But on top of that, how are you able to continue building a trust relationship with your group of investors, right? As you know, like raising money is pretty difficult, but also managing investors is also difficult. Like they get angry, they're like, "Oh, what's going on? I want my money back. Like, what's going on?" So how are you able to manage your team culture, pivot correctly, while still, I don't want to say this, but like keeping your mind focused as the voices of investors started concerning you? How did you manage everything?
Yeah, I mean, I went through a phase, like especially after the first time I raised the seed round, and you know, it was a few $1 million, and I've never seen that kind of cash before in my life. I mean, I grew up pretty poor, and like I never even had like a 6-figure job before. So there was a lot of high expectations of just like navigating that, feeling lots of guilt that like I failed them, feeling like just lots of tiny voices in your head, just like basically being like, you totally fucked this up, and like and they hate you for it. The reality of it is like they're not thinking that, and if you actually raise from like institutional investors, they're dealing with hundreds of other portfolio companies, and for them, their business is like they know that 99% of the investments that they make aren't going to work out. Not that necessarily they're going to fail, but maybe they'll either return their money back or get like a modest couple of 2-3x return. There's usually like one or like 1% or 2% that end up like just doing exceptionally well that like makes up for all of their losses. So I had all these realizations like afterwards, but like I really beat myself about it. And I don't think that way anymore now. I was always very transparent with them. I even despite all of the low periods of starting law trades, I would still send out like the monthly or quarterly investor updates. I would tell them, hey, like we didn't get to raise this round. Our revenue is declining, and it didn't feel good sending that, but I still sent it. And like, of course, you'll sort of sense like a little bit of maybe like disappointment because it's like, all right, they invested in you, they thought you were going to be $1 billion company, and it ended up not being that. It's looking more and more clear that it's not going to be that. But I think we lucked out in terms of getting good investors that like they don't really give us a hard time with that. They understood it. I think that especially with this round that we recently did, I actually optimized for a lot of like founder operators or even the VC that we took money from. There were former founders that started their own companies and sold it and then went into VC instead of purely being like investors, because that allows them to like actually relate to you better and have some level of empathy. And they've been there as well, right? It's like a startup isn't just like, isn't just like 20% month over month growth every single month for like the next like 10 years. Like there is like ups and downs that take place, and the right investors will understand that and they'll appreciate that and they'll know that that is like a normal part of building a business. So I think all that's to say that like, for anyone sort of thinking about taking money, for me, that's kind of helped optimizing people that have built businesses before, built other startups before, to just have a deeper sense of empathy for when things don't go right. And then even if you have like investors that aren't, that don't have like a founder background, just I would say just be transparent, but just don't beat yourself up as much, because honestly, they're thinking about so many other things. And they think way less about you than you actually think, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's actually a really good tip. And I'm personally guilty of this. And we also raise a pretty sizable seed round as well for Asian Hustle Network. And honestly, the past year has been hard. Like we had to cancel a lot of things, cancel all our events. And I don't know, just back in my mind is like, I'm just letting everyone down. How do I keep the team together? And I'm kind of going through your first pivot of your story right now as we speak. It's like, okay, like I'm talking to more founders. I'm all right. As long as I don't give up, as long as I keep thinking outside the box, things are going to work out. Right.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of curious too, like, how do you take care of yourself? How do you take care of your mental health? Because like, I think through your story, there's a lot of inspirations of grit, perseverance, never give up. But like deep down inside, when you're by yourself, when you're sitting there on the sofa, when you're eating breakfast in the morning, as you're waking up each day, like there's obviously like everyone has their doubt, right? As you wake up, like, oh man, I don't know if I can continue doing this. It sucks right now. Like, how do you take care of your mental health? Do you practice any sort of affirmation? Do you do you exercise? Like, how do you take care of that side of your mental health and your physical health as well?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. So for me, after kind of going through those different business pivots, and kind of like getting to this like product market fit level, I basically experienced like 2 deaths in 2020, like shortly afterwards. One, my mom passed away suddenly, and then 2, one of my good friends who was around my age. Who got me into internet startups to begin with. I learned a lot from him. He also was unfortunately killed. And these 2 deaths were like 6 months away from each other. So the reason why that relates to like how I feel when I wake up is every single day since that, I want to say it's been, close to like 2 years. That happened in 2020. I don't take any days for granted. That's number one. I view my time as really finite. I think like as humans, we know that we're not going to live forever, but like, I think the vast majority of us don't really like feel that or don't really can think of that in terms of years or months or days or hours. I viscerally felt that. And I wake up each day wanting to change, if that kind of makes sense. Like just my outlook, and not necessarily to like be better or be optimized or be more awake or whatever. Like I just want to just change or just a little bit, and just whether it's my perspective, and obviously it can be reflected back into the business and all of that. So it's this combination of wanting to change, wanting to treat each day like an opportunity to be different. And, I think, a lot of that advice kind of sounds a little like repetitive, but it's just milking each and every day and trying to make sure that I'm having the largest impact possible in this like 18 or 18 hour 20 hours that I'm like awake. And whether that's through learning something new, whether that's through discovering something about myself, whether that's like you know developing deeper, closer relationships with other people or having hard conversations. It's just really ultimately being as true and authentic as possible, with as little filter as possible for the remaining days that I have. So I wanted to preface with that aspect of it, and then things that have helped for me. And I wouldn't advise people to just go and just like copy this and do this for themselves and expect some sort of output. These are things that like naturally gravitated towards me, and I do it as a way of self-discovery and self-understanding. But journaling in the morning helps me. I think for me, I'm not a big morning person, and also when I wake up, for whatever reason, I'm always just like a little anxious. So being able to just like right when I wake up, drinking 1 liter of water, and just writing out anything that comes to me, not with any particular objective, just pure stream of consciousness, like anything that's there. For whatever reason, it feels a little bit better. And then I usually sort of do a short like meditation afterwards. There's no apps, there's no music. I'm usually sitting just by myself with like noise canceling headphones for at least 30 minutes, but usually like an hour. I usually feel the effects of it around like the 45 minute mark. And that to me just acts as another sort of like cleansing almost. It feels like I'm sort of stripping away certain layers of whether it's thoughts or stress or anxiety. And I just do it for myself. And I don't keep track of it. I don't view it as like a habit. I feel more in tune with myself. I feel more in tune with the universe. I feel more in tune with like things around me when I do get that quiet alone time in the morning. And then during the daytime, I just try to kick some ass.
That's amazing. I'm really sorry to hear about your mom and your friend. I can't imagine what you have been through over the last 2 years, but I sort of feel that too, because I actually had two siblings that passed away. So that feeling of like I need to make the most of my time, I think that is always in the back of my head, where it's like nothing's ever guaranteed. I don't know where that
Yeah.
thought comes from, but I keep thinking that way. And very similar to you, it's like I have a very like improvement mindset as well, where it's like every single day I just want to do something better, right? And I feel that that goes a long way too in terms of like mental health and like keeping yourself sane, because as entrepreneurs, it's just like there's not anyone telling us what to do. It's mostly us telling us what to do. And it's like an internal voice. And sometimes you don't even know if that's the right thing to do, but your gut just says, trust me. So you kind of just go down that path. And I really appreciate the fact that you shared that you journal and you write and you free flow. I think that it's a great habit for a lot of us to adopt, especially I feel like a lot of times, especially, that we kind of know the answer already, but throughout the day it's like you're just so preoccupied with work or attacking or conquering or whatever it is that you do, that you kind of ignore the voice inside your mouth and your stomach and your mind, right? That you really know the answer, what you need to do already, so you just have to like let it free flow, and you reread it and you're like, whoa, I know exactly what to do. Why was I so anxious, right?
Yeah, I think there's a very big difference between like having thoughts in your head and trying to sort of tackle that problem and putting those thoughts onto an actual piece of paper and taking a step back and looking at it from different angles. I think that's a very powerful thing, because it removes it from a lot of the emotions that might be tied to some of these thoughts. And sometimes it is your intuition, but sometimes it's your mind. And sometimes your heart will sort of tell you to go in a certain direction, but that's not always actually right. And sometimes you need to use your mind to be able to, like, your intellect, whatever way you want to look at it, from a non-emotional standpoint, to make like a right decision. So for me, it's just removing it, putting it in an external source, and looking at it from various angles and attacking it from different angles was really powerful.
Yeah, definitely. So I have one final question for you, and I think this question is pretty unique in our situation. I don't know if you noticed, but in the startup world, we realized that a lot of people go to like really high end schools like Stanford, Harvard, Princeton, whatever. And I feel like with our situation, it's like we make things work for us, right? And understanding our circumstances, networking in your situation, talking to a lot of people at 500 startups to get started. What advice do you have for an entrepreneur that didn't exactly come from the most privileged background, that wants to get into entrepreneurship, that don't have any connections to like get into startups and learn a lot more and find the right mentors in community? What advice do you have for them if they want to like get into entrepreneurship and never really thought that they can do it themselves?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, the internet is like the great democratizer of information, of access, of connections. And I think it's one of, it's probably the greatest invention of our generation, right? Like, there's people that are going to be able to listen to this podcast from all over the world, and, like, be able to um, pretty much listen in on a conversation with somebody who, frankly speaking, I wish I heard, like, when I first started the company, right? So I think that the world is moving less and less um, away from the credentialing. I mean, I'm sure it still definitely helps, right? Like, on paper, one versus another. In the early days, maybe the Stanford computer science dropout will get picked over you for like a seed investment. But ultimately, it's the people that stick around, and the people that have the track record, and the people that have like built it brick by brick by brick by brick over the years, that will completely overshadow um, anybody with just any credential, because your credential can only take you so far. And your work product is the internet, right? That's the ultimate resume: what you publish, what you think, what you speak about. And I mean, one of the reasons I did this podcast is I wanted to sort of share this story and just have that there. And if somebody wanted to get to know me, they can just click play, listen to this, and like get up to speed on my life story, and like develop a deeper sort of connection with them. And I'm always happy to sort of connect with people in that way. And that kind of goes into like the connections aspect of it. You can follow people on Twitter. You'll be surprised how many people respond to a cold email, how many people respond to like a Twitter DM. And I would focus more on the work, right? I think like the new resume is the MVP, is the product. The old resume is like, the PDF of like where you went to school, and like bullet points of like your work experience. And anybody can create anything on the internet now. So it's the great equalizer.
I love it. I love that advice a lot. Um, so where can our listeners find out more about you and reach out to you online?
Yeah, I'm on all the main social channels. You could find me on Twitter at R44D. Rod was taken with 2 A's, so I just replaced it with 4. Raadahmed.com. I also have like a Substack, rod.substack.com, where I write out like just weekly thoughts and things that interest me. But yeah, I'm all over online, raadahmed.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing everything on this podcast, Rod. It's absolutely one of my favorite podcasts and one of my favorite interviews so far. So thank you
Oh
so
man,
much for
thanks.
sharing everything.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. This was super fun.
Of course.